Welcome to the Learner Center Collaborative Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Martin, and today we have an amazing school leader, human, and my very dear friend, Eric Chagala. Eric is the founding principal of the Vista Innovation and Design Academy, also known as VIDA. He believes that all kids need a place to matter, that our actions say what we believe about children, and that schools have souls, and those souls need to be nurtured. And that's why we love Eric. His belief in design thinking for education is deeply rooted in his dissertation that focused on the critical resiliency of high-achieving Latinx youth. This research solidified the knowledge, not just belief, that schools have the power to either defeat or to perpetuate the status quo of a neighborhood. Eric speaks across North America in both workshops and keynotes on personalized learning, design thinking, and talks about what it takes to build a true school culture that will be ripe for innovation. He serves in different capacities to keep challenge with boots on the ground and the most pressing needs facing education today. He is still the principal at VIDA 10 years later. We co-taught at the Faculty of Graduate School of Education at High Tech High, worked at School Retool, and co-founder of Design Camp and Chief Development Officer for the nonprofit Unlocked. So many things. Eric lives in San Diego, right up the road with his beautiful wife, 2 daughters, and their golden retriever. Welcome, Eric. I'm so excited to have you as a guest on the podcast today and for people to get to learn with and from you. Welcome.
Hey, Martin, thank you so much. I am exceedingly excited to be here.
So excited. And if people could see the excitement on your face, they would believe it too.
Because we get to talk about rad stuff centering around kids with one of my dearest friends in the world.
Love it. That's the goal. So let's start. For people who don't know you as well and have not had the pleasure of getting to connect with you, share some of the key experiences that have shaped you as the amazing human and educational leader that you are today.
So I feel like there's something in social network theory people called like stairs. So I am a stair. When I gave my own celebration of learning to our faculty a few years ago, I talked about my love for Harry Potter, and my Patronus would be a wolf, because wolves I see as very like loyal pack animals who work together. And so with this stair concept and this wolf concept in my life, I have always stayed in places for a really long time. And so the average shelf life for an assistant principal at a large high school is not very long. And so I was an assistant principal for 8 years. When I first came in at Vista High School, awesome, go Big Red. We were about 3,400 kids when I came in, center of the city, high poverty, high ELD, high special ed, very vulnerable population, a school with a proud, rich tradition, though, and really mean a lot to the community. So everything that I have learned and unlearned, I feel came through that experience. So a lot of people that come on tours here and we talk about like dismantling the system of racist bias, standardized testing, and all this stuff. And like people find out that I invented a student incentive program about doing better on the CSTs and like the levels you'd raise. And I went on like the student TV network and gave out like gift cards, and like I managed all the data. I did all the stuff, and people were like, "But you're anti." I'm like, "Yeah, because we have evolutions in our lives that sometimes feel more like revolutions." And so what got me really to where I am today, I think the most important part, aside from that stair concept, which does play into it, is in high schools, like lots kids face hard things. And I got tired of having conversations with, kids going off to rehab, pregnancies, credit deficiencies, suspensions, all the things that we deal with in big high schools. And so in these parent conversations, and oftentimes based on where we were at, oftentimes through translation. So our translator, dear friend of mine, we started like asking, like we started wanting to know more. And so in these hard conversations, we would start asking, like actually start gaining some empathy without knowing that we were really doing it, because like design thinking wasn't really a term and leading with empathy wasn't a thing yet. This is back in the early 2000s. And so we started talking to moms like, when in kindergarten, they're all adorable. They're all wonderful. At what point, and it was typically moms coming in, at what point do you feel like you lost, so to speak, your child?
Yeah.
And moms were all able to pinpoint that they noticed in middle school something happened, and they were able to, even that we would drill down, and the most common year of issue, 7th grade. It's when they got jumped into the gang. That's when they started being distant,
Yeah.
all the things. And so started thinking like, I need to get to middle school, and not necessarily because I think I can change anything, but I want to understand this better. As like a lover of humans and as a social scientist, I want to know more about what is middle school, what happens in the 7th grade magical, unmagical year. And so an opening popped up in our district for Washington Middle School, center of the city. My dear friend Katie Martin was helping manage student teachers on campus. There's a lot to say about what had happened to that school and what had been done to it. Least to say, I was the 3rd principal that school year. So I was hired. My first day of work was February 13th, 2013. I was the 3rd principal that school year, the 6th principal in 7 years. And what we know about like school achievement is that the tenure of a principal is closely, a quality principal tenure is closely linked to quality teacher staying within a school, whether it's a hard school or not a hard school. And the more turnover there is in administration, the higher the quality teachers are more apt to leave for a more stable setting where they feel like their strengths and their interests are valued. And so we had a big task, and the state of California had already basically told Devin Vidishka, who was superintendent at that time, that, you know, basically either it was under No Child Left Behind, AYP, adequate yearly progress, not met for 8 years in a row, declining achievement all the time, declined enrollment, really low enrollment. And basically like, either you guys need to fix this school and do something, or we're going to need to do something. So it's during that very, very strong armed era of NCLB. And so I was brought in, and I remember my final interview with Devin and his executive cabinet team, he actually said, I think he may have wrote about this in his book, that he said, you know, whoever takes this job needs to understand that we're going to be changing the school and something drastic has to happen. And whoever does that, if they fail, it could ruin their career. But if they succeed, like it could like elevate their career. And it's like, fantastic. Like, sign me up. Let's go.
So I just want to like unpack a few things and highlight your experience as a high school assistant principal and the things that you experienced. I'm laughing as you're talking about these big parties and celebration because I can see it, right? Like I know back in the day I was like rewarding kids for like AR points, and you're like, and all of these things now that we know and still happen. But I love that you highlighted that as part of your history and unlearning those things to actually elevate students' strengths and needs and interests and actually create places where they can grow because they want to, not just because there's a pizza party waiting at the end. I mean, we all love pizza parties, but it can be for more things than just scoring well on a test. You got us to the point where you made this choice to go back to middle school. You're hearing parents saying that they lost their kids in 7th grade. You know, I was a 7th grade teacher, and I didn't really realize the impact of being in 7th grade right at the center, even of middle school, but center of a kid's experience. It is a hard year for so many kids. And when we create schools that are based on power and compliance, it just ostracizes them so much more and they become even more frustrated. So we can see how that dynamic continues. We see it in, graphs all over the place that kids start to decline in engagement through middle school. So you had this opportunity. Devin tells you it's either going to make or break your career. He was right. He is a futurist.
He is. He is.
So let's go back to VIDA now has just celebrated its 10-year anniversary. Where 10 years you have been at VIDA, you've done amazing things. So congrats on being there and all that you've done for the community. So tell us a little bit about that journey. Then you accept the position and you go in and it's Washington Middle. What happened in that next year? I know my perspective. I've shared my perspective, but I'd love to hear and what happened over the course of from February until you opened that school in August of 2013, right?
Yeah. And I think to like sort of like lay some of that foundation, um, it's just a quick side story, is on that first day when I came in, there were two yellow school buses in the parking lot. And I'm like jazzed. No one knew who I was. Like I had sent an email introduction or something. So I came in to the front and Miss Vicky, our attendance tech, like receptionist, is like, how may I help you? I'm like, I'm Eric and I'm so excited. She's like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, what? It's like, I'm the principal. I emailed you guys. I'm the new principal. And it's kind of like seeing her eyes like, holy goodness. And oh, here's another one type
Right.
thing. And I said, I am so excited to be here, but I'm even more excited because it's my first day and there's a field trip. Where are we going on the field trip? And she like confused, like, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean field trip? In the parking lot, there are two yellow school buses. That indicates we're going on a field trip on my first day of middle school. He's like, oh no, we don't actually go on field trips at Washington Middle School. I'm like, there are two yellow school buses, and I know we don't like bus in Southern California. She said, those are the No Child Left Behind buses. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, it's part of like No Child Left Behind. And it was explained to me that families every year are sent a letter and they have the choice, because this is, a non-performing school, that the district is obligated to provide them transportation out to one of the two middle schools in the more middle class neighborhoods that are higher achieving. And like, the letter, like small fonts, boobity gop, you have to have the wherewithal to like read it, be able to read in English or Spanish, understand what you're actually being read in the googly gop, or have a solid address that receives mail, right? So certain people are getting on the buses and certain people are walking past the buses. And one of my first things that I did at Washington is we got the buses moved to pick up at a different location so that the poor kids walking into the school weren't seeing like their peers get on to leave their school. So the first 6 months we were there was just about like making connections, trying to build some culture, build some trust. They'd been through a whirlwind. I remember, this is always stuck with me, when at Vista High, my first day as an assistant principal there, I met, she's since passed away, but I met the special ed department chair, and I was excited and I'm like, this is gonna be great. And so I introduced myself and she looked at me and said, I was here before you, I'll be here after you, you guys come and go. And she walked away. I was like, but I want to be your friend. Like, oh. And so this is part of that stayer thing with me, is we had to make sure that we build enough trust and capacity relationally along one side another on the campus, that they knew I wasn't going to come and go, that we're going to do something and we're going to do it together. And until they wheel me out, because it's a failure or not, we're in this. And so we had to start building those relationships. And then we spent the whole next year trying to figure out, what do we do? And so our math team, actually like a really powerful math team at Washington Middle School, they were working with Joe Bowler out of Stanford University. Common Core was about to come in, and so they were working with Joe, and Joe really liked the work that they were already doing and leading. And so I think they were drinking with her one night, hanging out, and they were explaining like, we have to do this thing, and there's this guy who's going to help us through it. We don't know anything about him. And Joe said, hey, have you ever heard of the D School at Stanford University? And no one had. And she said, they do this thing, it's called design thinking. Here's the link. I think you guys should check it out. And so the teacher shared that with me, and I'm great, awesome, Stanford, Joe Bowler, amazing. And I'm looking at, I'm like, empathy, like focusing on the problem, like we know what the problem is. It seemed a little, I drink Coors Light out of the can. I eat bologna sandwiches on Saturdays watching college football. But we checked it out and we decided we have nothing else. There's no process. We've got to figure this out. And so we started using some of those principles, like learning more about design thinking. And what at least I quickly realized and noticed is that we began coming up with really far out there, radical ideas very quickly. They're what felt like, from my perspective, I don't want to speak for others, but a lot of building of culture and trust between us because the vulnerability of the process, the use of empathy, and actually sitting down and finding out what do you think's gone on here? What is your honest opinion of what has happened? Not what you think we should do, but how did the school get to where it is now? Why are we here? I even walked down one day, there was a 7-Eleven on the corner. They weren't very fond of the school because they got, honestly, they, in their words, got ransacked, after school on days. And so talk to the guys that own and run the 7-Eleven. Lots of input, alumni, the current teachers, students, other support staff, just and the teachers engaged in that. So we were listening to the stories together and talking to each other and sifting through that. And this isn't revolutionary right now. This isn't a tweet. 13 years ago, 12 years ago, this was a bigger thought, but poor Latinx youth were having school done to them. They didn't see their place in it. There was a lack of any sort of engagement or experiences. Novels, literature, had been banned by a previous principal because it wasn't in the anthology and the textbook that is, content standard aligned. And so teachers were pirating books and hiding them and locking their doors. And the kids knew, if someone knocks to get in, or if we hear the keys jiggling, you got to hide the damn books.
So this totally tracks, right? So from my perspective, I have student teachers on campus. I'm walking on campus. People are yelling at each other. Kids are totally disengaged. It is a very lackluster building, drab. It just feels like a place that you don't want to be. And I think exactly what you said, school is done to you. So what?
And we're a mile from the jail for all of North County. We share a fence line with the school for expelled youth for North County. So it's that neighborhood, contextually for people.
So people are listening and they might be thinking, this sounds similar to my community, and or we have things way better. But for people listening, this was a school that was failing on all metrics, right? Is a school that, you said it had not met adequate yearly progress. People were disengaged, both teachers, students, kids are leaving the building. So 2013, we have a situation where you come in and you have to do something different. You start building relationships, you start connecting with teachers, start wondering and figuring out what the problem is. So what do you guys do?
Well, and I think a consistent problem within public education, whether it's outrightly stated or not, is a lot of blame gets put on teachers for things. And so I want to be very clear, what the state of the school, not the teacher's fault. The teachers were sticking through with and by the kids.
Yeah.
They were doing their best with these tyrannical leaders coming in through a turnstile of, one day, one person, and then we got another person with all their PLC notes and their rules and their write-ups and their memorandums and all the stuff. And so one of the things that we discovered through this is in empathy, right? Observing, listening, caring, actually getting in the life force of humans. These are incredibly creative, amazing human beings. And what if we just cut the leash and let them go? And so for this last year of Washington, which was our planning year, at Washington, there were 9 periods a day. All the other middle schools, there were only 8. Okay. They had, supposedly, the theory is they had added an additional period because so few kids had electives. They wanted more kids to get electives. Well, when I got here, 17% of kids had an elective in that 9-period day. Because you know what they were doing? The administration. They were just filling all these kids with more interventions. Everybody was double dosed in English. Everybody was double dosed in math. They had ELD, they had special ed study skills, and then you had additional reading intervention on top of your 2 periods of English that was basically just reading out the textbook. Like there was no
And none
choice.
of it was working, right? Same old thing and more of it,
And
right?
I charted it too, Katie. So we looked at academic achievement based on the CSTs, the California Standard Test or whatever it was called. And over the years, academic achievement continued to go down, even as interventions were going up. And parallel to the interventions going up, discipline was also increasing. So the things that were being done to poor Latinx youth, and I say that because it was like 98%, that was the population. As more was being done to them, the discipline was going up, and all these things that were supposed to improve discipline and improve academics actually made the academics go down and the discipline go up. But we keep doing it. So in that planning year, that last year, Washington, may have been one of the best years of my educational experience as a leader. We broke those structures. We went down to like 1 period of English, 1 period of math. Ellen Cruz, like one of the founding teachers, co-leaders through all the work, like really amazing human being. She like did Lego robotics. I think we called it math intervention on kids' schedules. But they played, but as they were playing, they were getting the mathematical sequencing necessary in order to understand code to make something in the real world work. And they really liked making something in the real world work. Like just examples of that all over started sprouting, which really helped fuel our creativity because we were able to see with unleashing the teachers, the children were becoming unleashed. And through this whole process, and we tell the story all over, and sometimes people we listen to stories and we have like confirmation bias a lot of times, oh, well, this would never work at our school because of this, or I had like a lot of people barb at me like, oh, you are too teacher centric. You talk about teachers and taking care of teachers and the adults too much. And in our system, we are student centered, and students are the center of all of our decisions. Like, you're not. You can say the words, but until you actually show me in your actions, you are a liar. And so I've operated for very successful, like not to like toot any horns, but we've operated very successfully from this mantra. If we don't tend to the adults, then guess who the experience sucks for? If the adults are not allowed the freedom and the space and the autonomy and the dignity to do the things that they actually want to be doing with kids and that tend to their strengths and their interests, if you don't do that, then they're not going to get out of bed and want to come, like eagerly come every single day.
So let's pause on this for a minute because I can see it's easy to understand from like you said, your own perspective, confirmation bias. People can say like, oh, it's too teacher centric or too student centric, all that. Where I see things be most successful, and I think VIDA is an excellent example of this, there are clear goals, right? You've defined your values, your aspirations, what you're trying to do for kids. And in service of that, which is why I would call you a learner-centered system, in service of those goals for learners, you are allowing the space, the creativity of teachers so that they can do what's necessary for kids. It's a very different system, though. Sometimes people hear teachers have autonomy to do whatever they want. That sometimes can go so far without clear goals, without alignment, without clear values. Teachers can close their door and say, I'm a professional, I get to do whatever I want because I'm empowered. That's not what I'm talking about, and I don't think that's what you're talking about. It's a collective community in service of those goals that are trusted, valued, respected, and encouraged to try new things, to actually do what's necessary.
It's like there's guardrails.
Yeah.
Right? So let me give you a specific, like for whoever's listening, a specific example of this. So we said, like you said, like very clear on what we want to do. And that has never wavered. How we actually function with it has, because kids change over time and so do the adults. But we started saying to teachers, what have you always wanted to do with kids and you've never been allowed to do? And as administrator, it is my job to find the resources, the time, and the structure to make that actually happen. And here are the the rules. Needs to intentionally foster creativity within youth. Needs to provide a technical skill so that kids can actually do something, aka have the ability to actually innovate. Because we can't just say these words without actually like putting things in place for it. Or it needs to go into our design process. And so, and people went wild. And at first it was hard. Like there were some people that didn't have great ideas at first. There's one of, our beloved founding teachers. She came up with this idea, said, our kids, they can't type and they're going to be left behind. Like they need to be able to have access to keyboards, whatever, and be able to type. This is before like Chromebooks everywhere and stuff. Yes, you're playing within the guardrails, but thinking, I'm not sure this is what you've always wanted to do with kids though, because like the technical skill typing and we'll write stories and that's the creative. She's since then realized like I love CSI, crime scene investigation TV shows. And so she created an entire forensics program for kids. That's what we're talking about. One of the most sought after programs on campus that kids will just sign up again and again and again because it's so interesting and want to take. Kids will show up to those classes. They'll come to school every single day to get that.
That's a great example of, again, within these boundaries, what we are trying to do for kids, creating those opportunities where they are pushed to do even more. I love that.
And the boundaries didn't come from Eric standing on some pillar somewhere saying, I believe in creativity and technical skills. And it's what we had decided collectively, organically, based on empathy from everyone around. Also talking to industry about what should we actually be doing for kids? Because we realized that most of us were good at school. So we went to school so that we could play school as grownups with children and not really having an understanding, and how important is having an understanding of where the economy is going.
Right.
People always come in, they're like, oh, our district, we are workforce oriented. And I said, oh, great. Tell me more about that. What do you mean? What are you actually doing? Our kids know their strengths. Great. What do they do with that? How do they apply it? How is that used in some way to like open up doors of aspirations? How do you reflect with them through that about what have they done? So what can they actually do so they can open up their own doors? And they're like, we are workforce ready.
Well,
we have a poster on the wall, Eric.
But so here's the thing, and I know you're joking, but like people I find don't come in and they don't know what to aspire to. Just as our dear friend Ed says about children, kids don't know what careers to aspire to if they don't see them. So when people come to you, and I've brought many people to your school, it's not because they are doing the best that they know. And so they haven't seen those examples of how to create workforce ready, where kids not only know their strengths, but they get to be invited to explore different careers and listen into what people do and go out in the world and try new things. And I think that's an amazing thing about VIDA is it opens up more and more possibilities as people can come visit and see, oh, that is possible. I've never even imagined we could do that before.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And, those are the people that we absolutely love, like sharing our stories and hearing about theirs from. And there's a significant number of people where adults came up with something in a back room and this is what we do. And like, I'm not sure why they come sometimes. Like you just told me you have it all figured out.
So you're right, and that is a process. Sometimes, like we're busy, right? Like we're busy.
Yeah.
To come up with this process, and
no one's a bad person in it.
Right. Like, and you hear that all the time. Our teachers are super busy. I'm out of the classroom. I'm a coach or principal or director level. We have to come up with this program and give it to teachers. You guys had a different approach. So let's go back to your teachers are experimenting. They're trying new things. As you launch VIDA, you actually came up with your gills, right? So tell us about your gills and how those were born and how that helped kind of guide the structure of the school.
Yeah, so our gills are our core values. So our mascot is we're the sharks. And so, and it's even more than this. So we have a very carefully constructed narrative, which means a lot to us. And
Mhm.
so our long name is the Vista Innovation and Design Academy. Lots of buzzwords like this is where we're located. Academy means school, innovation, design. You better be saying those things, right? So we chose that name though because we purposely wanted the acronym VIDA. So we're located in northern San Diego, 40 minutes from the border with Mexico. And the word vida in Spanish means life. And we wanted this to be more about our lives and who we are than just work or just school or anything else. Like this really has to be a part of whom we are.
Mhm.
And with that, like we started like designing, like we design school you want your own kids to go to. And both my like we don't even live in this city. Both my daughters came here. They went back to our city for high school and they went there for elementary, but we would not pass up this opportunity for anybody to get this. And so our mascot is the Sharks, and gills, the reason for that acronym is because gills are how sharks breathe. And if sharks can't breathe, they don't have life. Life in Spanish is vida. We are vida. And so we play on this that if we don't live by our core values and who we are, then we will suffocate. And we have to tend to and always go back to this. So the G is grit to persevere. There's a lot of like consternation over the word grit, but this was a long time ago, but it's had staying power with us.
Mhm.
The I's are innovating through design because our pedagogy, we're a design-based pedagogy, leading with empathy, learning through integrity, and then sparking creativity. So these 5 things, so it's really like, grit and innovation and design and integrity and empathy and creativity. Those are like our mainstays.
Mhm.
And what we have found, what I've seen, I think the teachers have felt this too, is when we get a little too big for our britches, or we get a little too tired, or we sway away from, or we just forget, or we're not as intentional about those concrete bedrocks, then we start losing our way. And
Mhm.
Jim Collins in the book, Good to Great, talks about how once you think you've reached like your peak moment, your decline has already begun. And so we've tried to be very intentional, and like even sometimes it hurts, but like allowing the vulnerable space to like say, hey, we don't talk about X as much. Like, oh, we need to,
Mhm.
as we've gone.
I
And I
love
think that
that.
helped a lot through COVID too.
I
Like
bet, right?
foundation.
The values that keep you grounded and being able to, the regression to the mean, right? We talk about it's so easy to get sucked back into what we know about school. And
Yeah.
if so many leaders, when talking about doing school differently, have to have that North Star or, the gills, as you guys call them, to continue to focus those aspirations and keep you moving in that direction. I love that.
And something, a conversation we had in May as a faculty in a meeting is we get this phrase, it's a common phrase. What is it? Ask for forgiveness, not permission, or something.
Yeah.
And so this is interesting to me because a lot of people who come in, they're like, "Oh, you asked for forgiveness instead of permission." I'm like, "Well, no, actually, one of our core values is integrity." And in my mind, and what I was sharing with the faculty is like, I want to make sure like we're all clear on this too, is we do a lot of rad stuff. And we do rad stuff in ways that people haven't thought about or done. And never once do we approach it from this space of, oh, we'll ask for forgiveness rather than permission. No, 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 no. Because I think once you lead with that, you already know you shouldn't be doing the thing. And so it's more about like, because this goes back to what you were talking about with like boundaries, we call
Mhm.
them guardrails. Structure actually like enhances and allows creativity. I think
Yeah.
they would call it like in industry, like constraints allow creativity to flourish. We live tightly within that space. Let us know exactly what the rules are, and we will follow the rules. And we've made amazing things happen because people get stuck on, we can't do that.
I love that you went back to your gills and integrity because you're not breaking rules. And I think from knowing you, you invite those conversations with your staff. What can we do? What are the boundaries? What are the guardrails? What can we do within that? And how do we make sure that we're still meeting the needs of our students? And we were talking to a district leader recently, and he was trying to get a waiver for his assessment policies because he was thinking they needed to put together this innovation waiver. And when he looked at all the things, he realized, I don't need a waiver. I can do all these things already. So sometimes those constraints we perceive that don't actually exist. And what I know you do for your staff is you give them that permission and create the space to talk about it so that you can create something that's sustainable, right? Because a school can't continue to exist if you're always just breaking the rules and not following in what you need to do.
And like, we say we're going to do this. That's a promise to parents. If you're breaking some rule and get called and have to pull it back, you're no longer keeping that promise.
What has been the impact of VIDA over the last 10 years? What are the metrics what does the data look like now after you've really redesigned what's possible for kids and teachers?
It's a great loaded question.
It is.
So we started getting a lot of attention from very poor school districts in the surrounding area because there was a superintendent's achievement gap like symposium in San Diego. And this is like 2014, 15-ish. And we were asked to do a session because we had the first year of VIDA had a 92% reduction in out-of-school suspensions. And let's be like pretty frank about that. Those suspensions were primarily poor Latinx males. And so when any school following the same discipline matrix, that the district sets up, is able to have a 92% reduction in out-of-school suspensions, there is, I think it was 78% reduction in classroom referrals. So we have kids not being excluded from school. We have so they're in school more, the learning environment being disrupted at a huge rate less. And then in California, they call it the Big Five for expulsions. And so I believe we had went from 7 to 0 expulsions our first year. And everyone's like, it's like Hogwarts. Like, where's the magic? Who's cooking the books? Like, what's all this stuff? And like the big thing people need to realize, because we haven't said this yet, Katie, I don't know, you may have. Same building,
right?
Same teachers, same kids matriculating through. And so one of our really dear sister schools, Design 39 in Poway Unified, they opened the same year we did, both schools based on design thinking. Sonia, the founding principal, she had 2 years off to plan. Founding faculty with her, there were 7 of them. They had a year off to plan. Brand new building. It's I love it. I love going there. It's amazing. Our teachers are the Washington teachers. And now we've had a trick, they've matriculated out over the years, but same kids, same building, same teachers, vastly different results. And so that was the first initial thing. And then Common Core came through. And so there was a pause on testing for a while. And if you ask me right now, what our test scores or proficiencies or whatever, I have no idea. I could care less. What I know is when I go into rooms, kids are engaged, they care. We do track freshman GPAs because, if kids are going to go to college, they need to be successful in high school. We need to know that their transition is effective. And so we need to know that they're set up for success. And so our kids do really well in high school. And we have a wait list of 700 kids right now who didn't get in. They're still trying to get in.
So you bussed kids off campus when it was Washington, and 10 years later, you have a waiting list of 700 kids waiting to get in.
The wait list is longer than what the enrollment of Washington Middle School was.
Yeah, I'm curious, what are the outcomes for students when kids walk across that stage? They're leaving VIDA in 8th grade. What have they experienced, and what are they leaving with because they've gone to VIDA?
So the way that we explain our program to teachers, and IDEO, the design firm, actually helped us come up with this idea, is what we get from our industry partners is that they want a future workforce that's like a T-square. So they want a breadth of opportunities and experiences for the people coming to the workforce. And then think about the T, the stick going down as rooted in world-class skills. And so like if you read the book, How Google Works, they use this term smart creatives rather than engineers, because they want world-class computer scientists who go to improv classes, that they're dancers, the ballerinas, photographers, artists, sculpturists, they garden, they do all these other things that provide a breadth of experiences, because what that does is it creativity, the way that creativity works in the brain is when people are being creative and going through creative thoughts, they don't just come up with a novel thing. What creativity really is when two disparate things within your brain come together and make a connection, allowing for a novel thought to come together. We can't imagine, this goes what you said about ed and, you know, looking in kids in their occupations. You don't just wake up with a crazy idea about something you have no reference for. You have to make those connections. And so one of the strongholds of what we do at the school is we provide kids with a wide breadth of opportunities and experiences, and we start training the brain. They're not going to walk out here as a world-class computer scientist. We know that they're 13. But what we know from brain science and the way that neurons work and myelin, if you don't know what myelin is, you need to look it up and study it, folks. Every time we learn a skill, it allows us to more quickly learn the next similar skill at a faster, better, more concrete rate. And so we call it with families, I actually use the phrase brain work. And so we are building their experiences and opportunities. That's a cross on the T-square. And we're building the brain work of skill development so that they can actually build on things. And so when kids leave here, they have both a breadth of opportunity experiences. They've also started developing really solid skills in a myriad of different things. And we've asked them to reflect. So how often do we do this in public schools in America? Kids, you just did something. You're so excited. That's so great. Write a reflection on it, because when we reflect, great. And then we check it off, we put it in the grade book, we throw it away, and then we move on to something entirely, totally different. What if we spent more time saying, kids, you did something, great. We're excited. Reflect on it, great. And ask this, because you did something, what can you do? And when we start training the brain to think like that, and when you and I, our kids are about the same age, Katie, yeah. When we think about the world that they're inheriting and the economy they're inheriting, if they're able to know what they did and know what they can do because they did something, then the doors for them in an unknown economy, an unknown, uncertain future, they're able to map out their own aspirations and plug themselves into that. That's when we're talking about knocking generational poverty in the nose. That's when we're going to actually make real change. And so our kids, we begin developing that brain work with them. And let's be clear, this is middle school, and don't give me this BS about our kids do a middle school explore wheel and that's giving them experience. BS. No, it's not. You do a middle school explore wheel because you have 3 different teachers with 3 set credentials. And so that you make the kids go through art and music and I don't know, whatever else you do. They have to go through that. That's not a choice. That's not exciting. You're doing it because you're stuck in the structure.
All right, so here's a question people are asking. Okay, great. Eric's told me they use design thinking, empowered teachers, kids are getting these deep, rich experiences. So I have tactical people who are wondering, so what does a day look like? How did you make a schedule that supports your gills and creates things that, that you have to do for school?
You know what's funny?
What?
Is you always know who an assistant principal is on a tour, because you know what assistant principals always want? They're the only people that ask for it. They want the master schedule and they want the bell schedule.
Well, there's assistant principals listening and principals who are going to give this to their assistant principals.
Those are super important things, right?
Yes, they are.
Absolutely matter. So we design, I think this is key. We design the adaptive features, the things that we actually want to be doing first. And then we designed the technical things. Where do kids go within the day? When are the bells going to ring? What is the schedule going to be? The structures came after, because we've had I've talked to a number of people over the last decade where, hey, we're so excited, we got this innovation grant, and so now we're on block schedule, and so we're trying to figure out like what we should do. You should figure out what you want to do, and then if that necessitates a block schedule, then you go to block schedule. So we have a crazy schedule because we absolutely led with the things that we should be doing for and with and alongside kids, and then make the structures come alongside. So the bell schedules don't really help the assistant principals when they ask for it, because it makes no sense. Let me try and explain it. Mondays, our kids go to all their classes. And so all 8 classes, touching base, connecting. Tuesday and Thursday, and then Wednesday and Friday, we're on block schedule.
Mm-hmm.
A modified hybrid block schedule. So most people are like AB, like odd, even, got it. It's almost what we do. So when we go back to the origination, our first intervention at VIDA, we decided in 2013 was going to be engagement, our first intervention.
Mm-hmm.
And, people are like, that's not on the state list of approved interventions, and there's no fidelity matrix, and there's no PD plan. Like, you can't do that. Engagement was and remains our first intervention for both children and adults. And so as we were building, and like we were sort of like an experiment, like we didn't know what was actually going to happen. We didn't know if going to a design-based pedagogy, and what I mean by design-based pedagogy is basically PBL. So before, PBL was like super cool, like project-based learning, and then infusing the design process within that. PBL provided the framework, the structure of pedagogy to infuse design thinking into what we do. And are we 100% project-based? Absolutely not. Because we do projects when it makes sense, when it helps the learning outcomes, like accelerate past what normal traditional teaching may do. Teachers still do direct instruction, like maybe 10, 15, like you still got to do all the things. We haven't thrown anything out, and we're not 100% anything or not. We knew coming out of Washington, and this is one of those things like you design for the poor kids, and it's wildly sexy to middle-class families. If you look at a 6th grader's schedule, it's going to say that third period, they have a class called Design Lab. And that's where, like, we told the teachers, like, what have you always wanted to do with kids? And then the way we inform student voice in that is then we put that on a list, and we tell the kids, choose 3. We promise you'll get one of your top 3 choices. And every few years we go through a refresh, and we survey the kids, like, what should we be doing? What do you want to do? What would you love to see as a class? So we give that to teachers. So the teachers, we have it right now. Athletes by Design is a class, because we just did last spring the survey with kids, and the teachers, when we coded the results, there are 2 teachers that like love basketball and love sports. They're like, oh my God, I never thought of that. I teach math. I want to meet their need. Now we have 3 sections of it. Like that. So Mondays is all periods. Tuesdays, Thursdays, odd. Wednesdays, Fridays, even. If you look at a 6th grader schedule, it's going to say period 3, this design lab class, and period 4 lunch. Based on what I just explained, period 4 lunch only happens based on their schedule 3 times a week.
Okay.
That's against the law in California. The children must be fed every single day. The U.S. Department of Labor says you must give a lunch break to teachers every single day. So what we've done is, with these 90-minute blocks, we've taken, and we just know, the kids know, the teachers know, that when it says period 3, you're actually on an odd day, you're going to go to period 3 and you're going to go to period 4, but they're not going to be for 90 minutes. And it's same on the reverse side with even. So what we've done is we take a 90-minute block in the middle of the day, and for 50 minutes, they get a design lab. And for 40 minutes, they get their lunch. 40 minutes because that's teacher contract time language. So what we've done with this block schedule, that's why it's a hybrid modified AB block, because they go to their design lab class every single day. It was an insurance policy when we started out. Insurance policy number 1, what if design thinking left 7th grade history as irrelevant to the lives of 12-year-olds as it has always been? What if project-based learning is a flop in English? Guaranteed insurance policy anchor that kid, no matter what happens in core classes, is going to have a reason to show up every single day to something they care about, that they're passionate about, that their teachers invented because that's what they're passionate about, bringing it together.
Awesome.
And second insurance policy, think about the demographics coming out of Washington into VIDA. We needed to make sure every single kid was guaranteed to have one of these classes. You may lose your traditional elective for ELD or special ed study skills or math intervention. There's 12 kids in math intervention or something still. But if we tied a class to their lunch period, no one could ever take it away. Jose shouldn't be out flying rockets. He should be in math intervention. Whoa, no, sorry. That rocket class, that cooking class, that athletes by design, that whatever class is tied to their lunch. You take that class away based on the block schedule, you're going to take their lunch away.
Great insurance policy connected to what you want to do for kids, right?
Katie, we won.
Awesome. I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to transition us to our rapid fire round. We heard so much about VIDA. I know people are going to have so many more questions. We might have to do a part 2 to dive into classrooms and lessons learned 10 years later. But I want to ask a few rapid fire questions to close us out. What is one thing we should stop doing in education?
Blaming teachers.
Oh, I love that. What's one thing we should start doing?
More time for teachers.
What should we keep doing?
Loving kids.
What are you personally focused on learning or doing right now?
I think I'm spending a lot of time around this idea of our 10 years. So it's not our anniversary yet. We're in our 10th year. And so our how might we for the year has been how do we capture the legacy of VIDA as a way to celebrate the start of our next 10 years. Nice. So, and that's not just hey, we're going to throw a party this year. It's how do we use this energy? And by legacy, we mean honoring the founding faculty, their work, those first few families, that first year, those are our biggest fans in the community still. They remember, they know, they were with the struggles because it wasn't perfect. It wasn't great our first year. But how do we take all that as a way to celebrate, aka party, for our next 10 years? How is this a launching point for what we do? Because if what we designed in 2013 for opening in 2014, if that's just how we remain and continue, how quickly will we be irrelevant?
That's such a good point.
Yeah, how quick,
the world's different now, right?
That it was 20 years ago. They're still doing the same damn thing. So we're calling it honor, party, dream. That's what I'm working on. I'm working on honoring, partying, and dreaming. Best job ever.
What's your favorite quote or saying?
It's something about batshit crazy. I wish I could remember it right now. It's really good. 2 that we use a lot on campus, though. Models build creativity, as do constraints build creativity. And then Rob Reardon, there is no rigor without joy.
Great. What are you grateful for right now?
I am grateful for the families who have trusted us over the years, for our founding faculty who've stuck through it, for those who have come since and have adapted and adopted to being VIDA and appreciating it, no matter how hard it is to be here. Because it ain't easy. This isn't just running off worksheets. This is a lot. It is a lot for teachers. We call it staffalty instead of faculty and staff. So our staffalty, including custodians, secretaries, everyone, we couldn't do anything without the whole team.
Yeah, love that. Last but not least, what is your hope for the future of education?
that there would not be standardized testing. And I think I said, and that's like generic, right? That's easy. Like, who wouldn't say that? Well, I know there's some people that would continue to say it, but, and this is why. When I talk, and I'm like you travel more, I have more people come travel to me. The biggest thing that's in the way of people feeling like they can do cool shit for kids is accountability and testing. Like people say, and I listen to people all over the place who are very powerful, say there's more that matters than just testing, but here are the testing dates and the public review of date. Like it's like when kids talk about students at the center, but they don't actually, their actions don't actually show that. Like people say a lot of stuff about testing, but they're actually like, let's just stop doing it.
Well, I hear that.
Gavin Newsom, let's stop doing it.
And there's a lot of people, not a lot, there is a movement of people rethinking accountability, right? Just like you said, constraints matter, guardrails matter, accountability, we want to be held accountable, but I hear people say we want to be held accountable to the things that matter most. So that is my hope in that, is that we create systems of accountability and assessment that actually help us understand how we're moving towards the things that matter most.
Well, and and people take it wrong sometimes because I can get pretty flippant about it just because I'm so frustrated. Kids need to be able to read and write.
Yeah.
And I tell families on tours, like, here, we'll talk about core academics because, and it's why, like, we're not necessarily 100% project based, because I know coming from high school that when they walk into high school, there's going to be a fairly traditional system that they are walking into, and they need to have some basis to be able to understand how to cope within that as a learner. We don't like it, but we tend to what is real. I've worked at 2 of the 3 high schools in our district in different capacities, and on the golf course having drinks with an old friend or something, and people actually say, like, we wish we could do the types of things that you do, but until college admissions change, we can't. I'm like, I understand your perspective, because you want kids to be able to get into college. Like I get it.
Yep.
So, I don't know. I'm stoked that in California, the ACT and the SAT have gone by the wayside. So at least for now, at the UCs and CSUs, I think it's a good step.
So there's people listening who are going to say the same thing as your friends on the golf course, right? I wish we could do it, but we can't because.
Yeah.
And yet you are doing it in the same system that they exist in. There are high schools who are doing things differently. And so for all of those people who are thinking they can't, I'm going to do one final thing. What's your advice to people who say they can't because of X amount of constraints that you have learned, that you might give them some advice of why you actually can?
I think there's a lot of good evidence out there. And I think Devin has like compiled some of it, maybe you have, around this idea that progressive schools still prepare kids for college admissions.
Yep.
High Tech High has an incredible college going success rate. Like, I think they're first or second in San Diego County for the they're second to Poway Unified, which is a very affluent, it's a great community.
Poway Unified.
And so High Tech High, which is very project based and very progressive and very equity centered, they have the second highest rate of seniors getting accepted to college. And college isn't the end all be all, but I don't hear anyone saying, well, we can't do cool things with kids because they won't get into community college, or trade school. Like, those are extremely important things, maybe even more important for the future in the economy than going to college, if you ask some people. So there are models, like you said, out there, and people are doing it. And there is evidence that learning deeply about something actually prepares you better for things.
Perfectly said. Well, thank you, Eric. So many great nuggets. I always love connecting with you, and grateful for your time.
Sorry if I got a little excited. I've spit all over my computer screen. Like, I must have been going off at some point. I'm sorry.
I love you.
Okay, love you.
Bye.